Hi vinyl community, John here. So this is my entry to the Omaha Introverts 500 subs contest. Congratulations, Hanna. Yeah, like I said, there has to be some kind of a record. Anyway, so Hanna asked us to answer 5 questions. The first of which was about where we lived. I currently live in or just outside a town called Barry, which is a sort of a suburb town of Cardiff. And Cardiff, of course, is the capital city of Wales, and Wales is a part of the United Kingdom. So yeah, that's my current position on the map. I've lived all over the place, otherwise spent a large part of my life living in Sweden, and shortly before we moved here to Wales, I lived in California, just south of San Francisco, for a few years. But well, I think we're planning on being here in Wales for the foreseeable future now, so this is where I am. Okay, now, you asked Hanna about best sounding record. I've actually made a video about this, and it's probably my most popular videos on my channel, because people sort of generally drop comments to me even now, and I made this over a year ago now, and it was, I think it was actually called Best Sounding Record in My Collection. So I'll leave a link for you to go and find that, but I'll show it anyway. So the best sounding record in my record collection is this. This is the Oscar Peterson Trio with Herb Ellis. It's a jazz record. Of Oscar Peterson, who's a pianist. This white guy here is Herb Ellis, who's a jazz guitar player. I think this was probably, yeah, it was the record that really pulled me into jazz. I hadn't really sort of understood or had an appreciation for jazz, really, and although I had 1 or 2 jazz records, I kind of held on to them because I thought one day I'm probably going to understand them, and yeah, I actually did. But it was thanks to this, and what's amazing about this, I paid £1 for it, which is what, perhaps about a bit more than $1 these days, and it's, yeah, the pressing is well, I don't know if it's the pressing, but it's the MPS BASF thing, and this is so good. I couldn't believe it when I put it on. I thought I was sort of hearing things. I think it's recorded in what they call true stereo, which is where musicians basically sit around a stereo microphone and record their session that way, rather than playing sort of into mono channels and then it being mixed into stereo. This is sort of true stereo, and this guy Oscar Peterson, when he plays guitar, he sort of hums along a little bit to himself, and you can hear his voice humming sort of over here, and the music is sort of all around, but the sort of many of the sort of the natural sounds that they make, whether they be, you know, finger clicking or whatever, it's really right out here, right in front of you. And it's thanks to that, I think, that when I got this, it really made me kind of investigate it, just see, you know, what the limitations of this record was. And so that's really the best sounding record, and it still is. I haven't found one that's nearly as good as this yet. So there you go. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. In fact, I don't really listen to it very much I mean, I play a lot of jazz these days, but I don't listen to this purely because, you know, when you find something that's really great, I think it kind of puts everything else in its shade a little bit. My favourite band is Led Zeppelin. I barely ever play Led Zeppelin because I don't want to spoil them for myself, and in many ways I don't want to spoil this. I sort of save it for special occasions. Next question Hannah asked was about decade or era of music that we least like. I thought about this. I would say if there's a period of music which I least like, it would possibly be from the 1990s basically through to now, because most of the music that I listen to and collect happened before that date. But then I had to sort of clarify that to myself. But you know, if you're going to narrow it down to a decade, which would it be? Would it be this current decade? Would it be the decade before, the first 10 years of the millennium? Or would it be the 90s? And I think I'm going to have to say the 90s because many of the records that I collect, or a lot of the music that I listen to, is progressive rock, which really had its golden age at the sort of like the tail end of the 60s until the mid 70s. Many people sort of quote 72, 73 as being the peak of that sort of creative period, I suppose. And it slowly petered out through the 80s, but then, you know, I grew up as a teenager in the 80s and kind of embraced a lot of the sort of the music that was going on then. I was very much into Duran Duran and all this sort of stuff. Just kind of new then, and David Bowie was a big name then as well. A lot of great stuff going on in the 80s, I think. Then come the 90s, I guess I lost contact because I moved to Sweden, and there, it was before the internet. It was, I didn't speak Swedish in the beginning, obviously, when I moved to Sweden, so I had to learn Swedish. So I was kind of cut off a lot from sort of popular culture that I knew and understood. So when Britpop happened, it completely went past me. When the grunge movement happened, again, that went past me. Not to say those things didn't really happen in Sweden, they did, but Sweden had its own domestic sort of rock and pop scene that, you know, didn't really mean much to me, but because I didn't know who these people were, but you know, that's sort of what I come to know at that time. So the 90s, and I guess 90s for progressive rock is when progressive rock really sort of was at its lowest ebb. There weren't many people doing it, and there were one or two, and the ones that were there were really clinging on by their, you know, by a thread. Now progressive rock's really taken off again, and so the past 20 years, I suppose you could say, it's sort of bloomed again. So although it's not necessarily mainstream like it was in the 70s, but it's certainly not far away from being that. And if you want to look for really good progressive rock, you can find it from the last 2 decades too. But in the 90s, it got very thin on the ground. So I would say the 1990s are my least favourite. You asked to show 5 psychedelic albums. I used the phrase psych, I think, and I'm not that familiar with psych or psychedelia, but I went through my collection and found a few records that I'm going to show. We're currently listening to this. This is The Twain Shall Meet by Eric Burdon and the Animals. I've had this record a long time, and I have to admit I've still got the price on because I don't want to rip it off. It's one of those that's kind of going to pull up the paper if I take it off, so I should really get some kind of chemical on that. But this record is one that I'd had for a long time. I knew that I liked the Animals, And when I got this, I put it on, and it didn't really mean much to me. And I've had it, I'd say somewhere, I've probably had this around about 15 years. And when I got it, I didn't really, it just didn't drop with me, it didn't really sync with me. But I fished it out just to make this video. I've been listening to it, and I'm actually thinking, wow, this is really good, really, really good. It's interesting, isn't it, how you grow, you age, and music that you perhaps didn't have time for before takes on a new significance. So yeah, I would recommend this record. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Another one. Now, this is amazing. It's Andra Shankar, Sitar meets Moog. Quite an unusual one, I suppose, but it's just brilliant. I can't describe to you how good this is, really. It's just on Reprise Records. I'm going to do a little bit of a needle drop with this, because I don't think anything I say about this, how good it is, will really convince anybody. You've got to hear it to believe it. It's a cracking record, and I think if you're looking for psych records, this would be well worth your time. Jerry were a British band. It's their first album. Yeah, they're the people that did In the Summertime, and the rest of the album is pretty much sort of typical of its time, I suppose. Yeah, it's sort of blues based, sort of pop, but yeah, there's definitely a a psychedelic edge to it as well.
'Cause if you see me, you're gonna jump and shout, yeah. Alright, it's alright with me, yeah. I'm gonna get you, baby, wait and see. I'm gonna get you, come look at me. Alright, woo, yeah.
So next I'm going to show Donovan. I often think of Donovan as being like a folk artist. He's actually from Scotland, and yeah, in the late 60s he had, I think, around about 3 records which I think would fall into the bracket of being psychedelic rock. So this is a record called Sunshine Superman. I'm playing it now. It's not a bad record actually, I quite enjoy it. I think this came out in '67. The one after this is an album called Mellow Yellow. I don't have, love to have it, just haven't seen it around yet. And then the third one is this one. It's called Donovan. This is really, really out there. Got a great production. Yeah, maybe I should do a bit of a needle drop of this as well, because it's yeah, you have to hear it to believe it. Really sort of laid back, but it's sort of definitely sort of psychedelic head music.
Dancing monkey, a little company here in hand. Break cheese with me, won't you break bread and have some wine? Break cheese with me, won't you break bread and have some wine? A good skin tambourine, what sights that has seen. Blazing eyes of dancers, daughters of tinker queens. Break cheese with me, won't you break bread and have some wine? Break cheese with me, won't you break bread and have some wine? You hang your cloak in a gypsy fashion, I see a skull of an ancient lashing. Born a babe in Macedonia, to the sound of Caesar clashing. Break cheese with me, won't you break bread and have some wine? Break cheese with me, won't you break bread and have some wine? I can see by
also going to show this band. This is the Nice. They're basically most famous, I think, for being the band where this guy comes from, Keith Emerson. He went on to join Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which are a different band. I quite like the Nice, what we're listening to now. Not really a big fan of Emerson, Lake and Palmer though. But at this stage, the Nice, yeah, they're very much a psychedelic band, British psychedelic band. This is the first album. It's called The Thoughts of Emrys Dajkovic, or something like that. I can't read it. Yeah. So what do you think? And so this is the second album by the Nice. I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce that. Hard to read, and it's I think it's probably in Latin or something. Yeah, so this is what we're listening to now, and yeah, very much a British psychedelic album of its time. Jimi Hendrix, obviously, sort of as a psychedelic artist, and the 3 albums that the Experience made are all great. They're all good, and I think most people, if they're going to show a Hendrix record in this connection, would probably show, you know, the first one, I Experience. This is Electric Ladyland, so it's Jimi Hendrix's 3rd album, and for me, this was the first Hendrix record I ever heard, and it's brilliant. It's really, really good. For me, it's my favourite Hendrix record, and probably one of my favourite records from the 60s. And yeah, this is sort of real sort of experimental. He spent a lot of time in the studio, and there's some crazy stuff going on with the music. Recommend it. I would suggest you look into getting that. It's a double album, so you get your money's worth. So Spanky and Our Gang. I've shown this before in different connections. This is a great band. usual cover, I suppose, and a label there. Check these out. These are quite fun. They're also described as being sunshine pop. Don't really know what that means, but they're also, you know, fairly psychedelic. They spend a lot of time with, you know, stereo effect and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. They make really good use of stereo effect. This is one of the albums I use if I get a new stereo. Always put that on to test it out. Okay, so that's my Psych records I'm going to show. And then you asked about show a record with a cat on. I found that quite difficult. I just couldn't think of any. And then I thought of this one. So this is Carole King. Got the cat on there. Tapestry. But I suspect that many people have shown that because it's kind of an obvious one. So I looked a bit further and I found a few illustrations of cats, although small little details. This is Kate Bush. It's the Never Forever. It's her third album. You can see a cat in the illustration there. Eddie Brickell and the New Bohemians. Got a cat on the front. And then this one, record I got just last year, Herb Ellis and Red Mitchell dogging around. So the illustration is of a sort of a club with dogs in, and they're in a club called the Stuffed Cat, and the sign for the club is actually a stuffed cat outside. Now those are all cat pictures on records. I was really disappointed because I couldn't really find a sort of a one with a great big cat on the front. But then I thought in the last minute, I know what I'll show. This. So this is Cat, the great cat. Worship me or die, it says. On your knees and bow to the great cat. So there you go. That's my nomination for a cat on a record. Okay, everybody, thanks very much. Congratulations again, Hannah, and I hope you enjoyed this. Look out for my next video. Thanks very much. Bye.